Good afternoon, Greg.
Hey Keith, good to see you again.
Yeah, same here. I can't believe it's Tuesday again.
They
Well,
keep coming around quickly, don't they?
I know we have to come up with a name for, they're like Freaky Fridays, so maybe we have something for Terrible Tuesday. No, that's not.
Taco Tuesday.
Well, Taco Tuesdays goes on Tuesdays at home. Other times it might be Thursday, but
Right.
so,
Tacos are good any day of the week.
so today's episode is about tacos and
How
so
spicy do you like yours? Yeah.
yes. Well, spicy can be good, but if you're dealing with customers, you gotta be very careful.
Absolutely. Yes.
So anyway, so interesting, one of our subscribers had requested that we talk about like how to start a business. Like what are the steps from the beginning to getting into business? And I said, I wrote back and I said, stay tuned. So I had no choice. I'm committed.
Yeah. Well, it's a good topic. It really is.
I think it is. And what makes it even more interesting, which has to do with like where you and I are in our careers in business,
Mhm.
me being old and having done it from before we had telephone. No, just kidding. We had
You're not that old.
and you being new to the world of owning and operating a business. So
Yeah.
I think what I'd like to start with is having you talk about what was the process you went through when you finally said, I want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, early on I was thinking about do I start a business on my own from scratch? Do I buy a business? Do I buy a franchise? Those were kind of the three things going through my head. Um, and the other thing I was thinking about was how I was going to finance that. But first and foremost, I was thinking about, okay, do I buy an existing business, start something from scratch, or look at franchises? And I finally decided on to at least start with a franchise model. I wasn't eliminating the other two, but I was prioritizing franchising first. And mainly just because I was looking for something where I didn't have to, reinvent the wheel. I knew there were franchises out there that were, relatively affordable. Because obviously, when you start a business, depending on the business, there are some that require quite a bit of capital upfront. I didn't have 6 figures to go and invest in a business, or 7 figures. Um, so that was really where my thought process started. And once I started looking at different franchise opportunities, I thought, yeah, this is the direction I'm going to go. This seems to be right for me. It felt a little less risky than going out and, let's say, buying an existing business where you've got to take kind of a leap of faith in terms of, are you buying a good company? Yes, you can look at financials and um, financial information, but when you're buying a small privately held company, I was thinking, well, what don't I know about? What am I not going to know about it when I get into it? At least with a franchise, I thought, there are proven success stories within franchises that I can kind of model after.
So, it's interesting because you talk about, the process of should I build something that has no brand from scratch,
Right.
or should I buy something that has a recognizable brand that will give you more credibility coming out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a very good point in terms of what somebody should think about, because it's not just the cost factor of having to start and do everything on your own, because most likely it's going to cost you more money, but it's getting out there and bringing in business when you're an unknown.
Yeah.
It's like
Yep.
opening up a burger place next to McDonald's and it's, Greg's Burgers.
Yeah. Yeah. And
What,
that played a big role too, Keith, for me personally, because I thought, okay, yes, I could go out and be a business leadership coach, but it's not like I'm well known. It's not like I haven't written books or anything like that. I've worked for small, relatively unknown companies. It doesn't mean I can't do the job and do it very well. It's just that from a familiarity standpoint, it's not, I'm not a household name. So going with a franchise like Focal Point, I felt gave me some, like you said, some credibility. It gave me some coaching material as well to be able to use when I'm working with clients. So not only do I have my own experience, but I've got the experience of what Focal Point has built over a 20-year period.
yeah, and the 200 plus coaches that are already in the network
Mhm.
that you have access to. So that's I would imagine that was very important point when you were thinking about, should I go with one company over another company?
Sure. Yeah. But really, Keith, I think the big thing was the initial investment. I mean, because I looked at some other franchises where it was $1 million to get started. And that just I didn't want to go and borrow a bunch of money to start up to do a business, whether it was a franchise or a startup. I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that. That would have been too much risk for me to take on. So I mean, you can start a business with relatively little money, right? I mean, I could have probably started a coaching business for $5,000 or $10,000, or maybe even less. Or I could have spent probably a couple $1,000,000, depending on the type of business. Right?
Yes.
So I think that's the starting point.
Yeah, I agree. And the interesting thing is because when I opened my first retail location in December of 1985, I know it's a long time ago. It's funny, I think back on that now and it's like, how could it possibly be? That's 39 years ago. It's like, wow.
And it seems like yesterday.
Yeah, well, I don't know about yesterday, but pretty close.
Okay, last Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. But it was, I remember so well, one, the excitement that of, I'm gonna open up my own business because I already been in the industry, the optical industry. I had a job. I had already been in a partnership in a small retail business with my former bosses. But now I said, that's it. I'm going out on my own. Part of it was ego driven, to be honest. I mean, I wanted to be the McDonald's of the eyeglass business. I wanted to have a lot of locations. This was my vision. And when I made the decision, for me, because everything was bricks and mortar, there was no online business that, yeah, I can get into that eyeglass business online for, like 1/10 of what it would cost me to do it on a brick and mortar.
Right.
So I had to find a location. Okay, that was, step one.
Physical location, right?
Physical location.
Oh.
But I really should walk back because it's got to have financing. Can't start looking for a location if you don't have financing.
Right.
I had a certain amount of cash that my wife and I had saved from my wedding, some from savings and things like that. Back then the gifts weren't as nice as they are today. So I had to get the financing. And once I knew I had the financing in place, and I had to actually price out all the different things, which I already knew from having had a small partnership in a medical building. And we had a small dispensary, eyeglass dispensary in a medical
Okay.
So that was, my first experience with owning a business, but it wasn't my own. I was a minority owner.
Mhm.
The partners were brother-in-laws married to sisters. And I just wanted my own. But I knew because of building that office and buying equipment and inventory. So I had managed their store for a number of years. So I had the experience in the background to know what I needed to do, knew what I needed to buy.
Sure.
And then I priced out all the different things, and then what would it cost to lease a location? Where would be the best uh, place? I at the time, uh, trying to think. No, I still lived in Brooklyn. I hadn't bought my house yet. This was pre-children, and so I started looking for locations, and I called brokers, um, and I went to at the time was one of the largest, real estate retail brokers on Long Island, and I started looking at locations. I finally settled on a location in a new shopping center. Okay, and the shopping center was not a major shopping center that had like a major tenant. The major tenant was CVS at the time, so that was the attraction. So everybody goes,
Yeah, that would seem like a compliment to your business.
right, and we took a space right next door to CVS.
Sure.
So I knew that the thing was that people were going to come, at least once or twice a week. That they're running into CVS for something.
Yeah.
Family, you need diapers, you need, toiletries, you need all kinds of things. So I
Yeah.
knew there'd be consistent traffic. I chose the location, negotiated a lease. Of course, you have to, generally almost every retail lease you signed, at least back then, you had to give 1 month rent, 2 months security. I
Mhm.
believe at the time my rent started out maybe $2,500. So there was 2 months rent, 2 months security and 1 month rent is $7,500. Boom, that's gone.
Yeah.
But the real major expense from an outlay perspective was the build. At a build location, we were given a square box,
Yeah.
okay, which was 15 by 100.
Yeah.
So we had a door in the center, 2 windows. So, I envisioned, okay, we're gonna have all our eyeglass frames and in that little area where people can walk by and window shop. And so I had the vision, funny, I use the word vision for the eyeglass business. And I, and so I had to go out and had to hire an architect to design it, the different rooms. I needed a lab. I needed the front selling area. I needed an examination room. I needed a room for training contact lens, purchasers and how to use contacts, take them in, but not, that kind of thing. An office, plus a bathroom. So that
How long,
expense,
how long did all that take?
uh, if my memory serves me, which doesn't always do, I would say from the time I signed the lease to opening was probably 4 or 5 months. Because remember, it was a new shopping center as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The reason I asked that question is, like you said, you had money to put down. You had this build out over 6 months, let's say, which costs you money. Plus, you're not in business yet, right? I mean, all that is cost you're incurring before day one,
right
right?
now,
I used to
you're
call
right.
it day zero, right? I
Day
mean,
zero,
that's
exactly. But the good news was we didn't get charged rent for the months until we opened. So
okay. That's
we had
nice.
that built into the lease.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we give you 1 month rent, 2 months security, but we don't start paying rent until we officially open.
And I don't know if that's something you had negotiated or if that was just the general rule at the time, but I think it's really good from a business owner perspective to be thinking about how can I limit my cash outlay during that, what I would call is your startup period? Because
Yes,
that can be that can be really a dangerous period where you've made the commitment, right? You've jumped in the lake, but now I don't have any revenue coming in, right? I don't have any, I still got to build my brand. I've still got to develop customers, and yet there's expenses coming out of the bank account already.
Yeah, and that was a negotiation that I tried to do in every store that I leased, because it was always, even if I was taking a store that was already built, wasn't built to spec for what I needed. So it may need,
Right.
build some rooms, knock down some walls, certainly need to paint and carpet. So, I had a checklist of all the things that I needed in order to get this store open.
And I think we're seeing that so much today, at least I see it here in Minnesota, where buildings turn over pretty quickly, right? Like, it's a restaurant 1 month, and then a few months later you drive by and it's a clinic, and a few months later you drive by and it's a Dollar Tree, or
Yeah,
it
well,
just seems
especially
like,
since COVID. I mean, that
yes,
stores
yes.
went out of business, restaurants. I mean, they couldn't survive.
So, there's a case where, like you said, you had to, even though you found spaces that you really liked and you felt like they were really a good fit for what you wanted to do, you still had to make some investment to
Oh,
get
yeah.
it to the way you wanted it. And again, I think that's really important to consider when you've got physical locations as a business owner, that you're gonna incur cost before you start generating revenue, and sometimes some significant cost.
Yeah, so had I not negotiated my leases that way, it could have taken me, well, let's put it this way, if it took 6 months to get open, that would have been 15 grand down the tubes with nothing
Yeah,
coming.
yeah, and not that it's wasted, but it's something you got to build that into your plan. Which I think is really important to have as you're starting up a business. And I don't think it has to be real detailed, because I know it's going to change from when you think of a plan and when you start to implement it, things are going to change, especially when you're starting up a new business. But it's important to have something documented so that you understand that, yeah, I might be opening my business in August, but I'm not going to collect any revenue until December.
Yes, and all this had to be taken into account and in my calculations. And
Yes.
when I opened my first store, which would become the model for future stores, you start to get a sense of, okay, where could I have spent less money?
Mhm.
Where did I make my mistakes?
Yeah.
But not many people, that open up a retail store have desires to open up, the second, the third, the fourth. They're basically, I want to be a neighborhood business. I'm opening up this kind of store, and that's my life. Okay,
Yeah.
every day, that's my life. But needless to say, it takes a lot of exploration if you don't have the experience. I did have the experience, as I said, from the first business that I was a partner in, because if had I not had that experience, I would have been like, what do I do? I mean, I really wouldn't have known. I would have think that, I learned in that business that you can lease equipment, all the eyeglass, machines that make the lenses. I was able to lease that. I was able to lease the optometrist, the eye doctor's equipment, which means that you're putting into your cost structure a monthly payment. As
Yeah.
opposed to, I got to lay out, because had I had to lay out that cash, and again, I can't even quote myself on this, it's been so long, but if I remember correctly, it was probably between those two, the eyeglass machines and for the lab and the doctor's equipment, probably 35,000-40,000 right there.
Right. I mean, that's a lot of upfront cost you had. And that's going to be true in a lot of businesses, right? Where you're going to need some equipment to get started.
Right.
Another interesting thing I just thought of, Keith, as you were talking is, you're, depending on everyone's situation, it's different, right? But you're starting this business, and like you said, you had to get your store ready. I mean, you had to spend a lot of time of your own doing that. And I don't know if you were working at the time or not, but you know, if you're going to be doing all that starting of a new business, one thing to consider is, am I still going to be working in a regular job? And if I'm not, okay, well, how am I going to support myself for this time period? Because I think most business owners, when they start a business, think, you know, I'm going to get this thing to where it can pay me a salary, right? Whether you take a salary or a job, that's a different story. But you've got a period of time there where you might not have any income coming in. And again, you need to plan for that because you've still got your own personal expenses. And depending on your family situation, you know, that can be pretty significant, right? If you got a mortgage to pay and you're trying to start a business, those are the things you need to be thinking about is how's this going to work from a cash standpoint? How am I going to make sure I can still pay my bills, my personal bills, and start up a business if I'm not working? Is my spouse working? Have I saved up enough money that I can have a period of time of no income coming in because I'm going to live off my savings? You know, so all of those things get rolled into consideration. You know, I've talked with a lot of business owners who they started their business when they got laid off from their corporate job and they got a severance and they got a significant severance. So they said, hey, I can live off of my severance for 6 or 9 or 12 months while I'm getting my business going.
Yeah, I didn't have any severance. So what I did, I was building the business while the other business that I was in partnership with was still in existence. It hadn't closed yet.
Okay, so you had a revenue stream.
I had some revenue. My wife worked too. So my wife's a
Okay.
nurse, has been for
Right.
many years.
Yep.
So we did have income, but it really, once that closed down, you know, the first year in business, I don't remember taking much of anything. I mean, we definitely lost money the first year.
Right.
And, so, you know, it became like, you know, who's getting paid this week? You know, you had to pay the employees, you have to pay the doctor, you have to pay the rent.
Yeah.
Those all have to come first before
Right.
you. And that's a decision that, you know, if you're saying I'm going into business, that's what I want to do, that's a decision you have to make.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, I had no choice.
Those aren't small decisions either. I mean, those are really the things,
you
know,
stomach for it.
I know you've dealt with a lot of business owners, Keith, I have as well. And we've both dealt with business owners who have closed a business, you know, and that's a hard thing to do. And sometimes they close pretty quickly. I mean, because there just hasn't been enough thought put into, again, there's a lot of moving parts in that first 6, 9, 12, 18 months of startup that you really got to be able to plan what it's going to look. Because why do most businesses go out of business? Not because they don't make money, it's because they run out of cash. They run out of cash.
Undercapitalization, I would say, is, you know, the death of many businesses.
Yeah.
So just not to go off topic because it's all part of the whole starting a business, but I knew that I didn't have enough capital. Okay. And I knew, I mean, I'm a risk taker. I mean, and that's part of being an entrepreneur is you have to have the stomach for risk. You have to have, you know, the thought process that like, I'm going to make this work. Now, what does that mean? That means you may have to go to friends and family and borrow some money.
Yeah.
When cash gets short, you may have to go to the bank.
Yes.
You know? So, you know, which, you know, are you even fundable? You know,
right.
You know, again, what it was like 30 years ago or 40 years ago in terms of banking, which I'll tell you a funny story about my ability to get financing, but I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that I'm not a quitter, never have been to this day. And I knew I was going to figure it out because I had that kind of confidence in myself and my skills. So, you know, as long as I'm breathing, I can sell. And that's what I did. I really spent a lot of time. I lived in the store pretty much 6 days a week, my wife and I. But she eventually left her job and came to work at the store.
Right.
And it turned out quite well. Where I went a little crazy is that I don't even think I was making money yet. I decided I was going to open up a second store. It's like, deciding, well, let's have another baby, honey. It's like, but we can't even pay the mortgage. How can we afford another kid? We'll figure it out. Well, for certain people, you do figure it out, whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a good recipe for success in business. I think it really requires guidance, research, which is all available today, which, I didn't have that same availability of information. I mean, you can go online to the Small Business Administration. You can go, I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure you've heard of SCORE.
Yeah.
Just, retired executives. It's
Right.
free.
Right.
So those are the kind of things that people today can utilize as resources to learn, am I ready to go into business? And, I didn't create a business plan for the business until I decided to franchise.
Okay.
I didn't say, okay, let's create a business plan.
Well, my guess is it was up here. You had the plan. Maybe you didn't have it documented, but you knew what you were doing. I mean, you knew what you wanted to do. You knew when you wanted to do it. Maybe it wasn't the right time to do it, but for you it was. Again, based on your, ability to kind of handle risk and the confidence you had that you were really pursuing the right, the right kind of business, that your business model was going to be successful.
Look, the one thing I knew, I was in an industry that would always be around. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people can't see. And people like us, we reach a certain age, everybody's going to need glasses.
Right.
So it reminds me, I think it was the Barney's commercial that they're sitting on the stoop and he's talking about starting the business. And, what do I do? Says, I don't know, but they're all going to need clothes. And I think that was, I'm ad-libbing it, but it was sort of like that,
But I like what you're talking about here, Keith, because I think one thing that is really important is, when you start a business, yeah, I think a lot of business owners, they have a passion around something, and that's what drives them to start their own business, right? Maybe they have a passion for plumbing or construction, right? So they start their own construction business or they start their own plumbing business, but they have this passion that they just have something that they love, right? So they get into their own business because that's all they want to do. I think there's other business owners who say, I don't know so much that I'm passionate about anything like that, but I want to run a business. I'm passionate about business. So because they maybe have seen, like I would take myself as that example is I have seen how businesses have been run over a 40-year period. And I looked at that and said, you know what, I can do that as well or better than how I've seen it done. So did I, because you asked me at the start of this session, different businesses I was looking at. And I was looking at businesses all over the map, from coaching to like a physical therapy business, a heavy industry business I looked at that was actually a franchise type business. So I was looking at things all over the map because my passion was business itself.
Right. Right. So there's two different things there. One is you go to school to be a doctor or a lawyer and you open a practice. Okay.
Yeah.
Or you go to school to learn how to be a chef. You open a restaurant.
Right.
In my case, I went to school to be an optician. I opened an eyeglass store.
Yeah.
So those are very specific things that lead towards either you go work in a restaurant as a chef, or you go work in an eyeglass store as an optician. So all those things, there you still need employees to go along with the employers.
Yeah.
So the big decision that I think people make that are going to go into a business that's not related to something they've gone to school for is, one, research the industry. Two, is there a need for this business where you live, if that's where you're going to open your business? When I say, is there a need, is it something that, there's very few of that type of business and there's plenty of room for growth in that market? Or you're going into a saturated market where you're going to have to fight to get your business ahead of the other businesses?
Right.
So those are serious, thoughts that a lot of people don't think about when they're going to start a business. They go, yeah, I'm going to open up a clothing store for women, and okay, well, what age category are you going to focus on? Well, I'm going to focus on all women. Okay, that's pretty broad. That means that you're going to need a lot more inventory. Oh, I didn't think about that. Well, if you're going to deal with all women and not be between specific ages or sizes, because, like in the men's world, it became, you had big and tall shops, okay, which is a niche within clothing. So, it's not just let's go into business. It's like, what do I need to know in order to go into the business I want to go in? Okay, because
I think you're really hitting on something here, Keith, that's really critical, is that I think one of the things that's really changed over the years from when you and I first started in our work world to today is businesses have niched down really into very, very detailed, what seems like small niches, but that's where they can be the most effective. So like you said, as opposed to selling women's clothing, which is what we used to see when we were young, right? Now businesses are selling women's clothing to, a particular age group, a particular, they're selling to moms in their between the ages of 28 and 40. They're selling to senior women between the ages of 55 and 75. They're selling to young women between the ages of 16 and 22. And not just age, but other demographics as well. And by doing that, they're able to focus their business, really laser focus on who their market is and who their ideal customer is.
yeah, because
And I think that's something really as a business owner to think about, who is your ideal customer.
right, because you could target a specific part of a market, which helps you in your buying, your inventory, your costing. I mean, there's so much that I've learned in all my years in business that look, I could teach this stuff, to people that want to start a business. That's why we became coaches. Okay. Is because we have the requisite experience to sit with somebody and say, someone says, I want to go into business, Greg. It's like, what do I need on the finance side? How much money do I need? How do I know how much money do I need? Can I get financing? How much cash do I have to have in the bank? If I do no business for 6 months, and what is the reserves need? Those are the questions you would ask somebody like yourself, who that's your background, that's your experience, that's your skill set. Wasn't my skill set. My skill set was I could sell anything to anybody at any time. But the thing is that there are all these different parts of a business that you have to be able to address when you're planning. It's not just, I want to go in business. Okay. What kind of business do you want to go in? Do you have any experience in that business? Like, did you work in the industry? I want to own a plumbing store. Okay. Are you a plumber? Okay. Have you worked as a plumber? No, I just think everybody needs plumbing. Okay. Well, how many plumbers, are in a 10,000, population in your area, that like within 3 miles? I'm just giving you some sense of what somebody should be thinking about before they just say, I want to open up a plumbing store.
And Keith, the kind of the maybe the offset of that would be maybe somebody wants to own a plumbing or an electrical business, but they don't have experience in that. It doesn't mean they couldn't go out and buy a company like that. And if you bought one that was big enough and you said, you know, I don't have to be hands-on in the business. I can run the business and I can have 8 or 10 or 20 plumbers who work for my business, right? But they have a desire for whatever reason because they want to run a plumbing business, or they think, you know what, there's a need for this. You know, during COVID, we saw a lot of that, right? A lot of need for home service businesses.
That's a very good point. So now you're talking about a different type of person. That's like a true entrepreneur, someone who says, I've investigated the plumbing industry. The margins are great. Okay, I'm not a plumber. I'm never going to be a plumber. I don't want to be a plumber. But I
Right.
like the business. I don't want to start a plumbing business from scratch. Let me see who's going to retire, you know, who's selling a plumbing business, just what you just said. Let's see what the costs are to buy the business. How much cash do I need to buy the business?
Mhm.
You know, so I mean, we can go on for hours with this. I mean, hours. But I mean,
Well, and I think you've touched on something though, Keith, because there are, you know, there's a lot of people your age and my age who have owned businesses for a long time who are saying, you know what, it's time for me to move on. I've owned my business for 30 or 40 years and it's time for me to get out. And the baby boomer population, right? They're like your age and my age. So they're getting ready to look at what's next for their life. And they want to do something different. They want to slow down. They don't want to put up with the headaches of of business ownership anymore. So they're figuring out how do I exit out of this business? So there are opportunities for new buyers to come in and own businesses.
and the business broker business has become huge. Okay.
Yes.
Especially since online, you know, you don't have to be a business broker with a corner shop, you know, you're online, you have listings, you know, what city, what state, what, you know, what zip code. You start looking for plumbing businesses for sale or whatever you're looking for. But you know, there are a lot of very successful businesses that stopped growing years ago because the owner's tired, you know, they're not interested in the new way of doing business. Needs young blood, needs somebody who's going to come in with fresh ideas, fresh marketing, you know. I mean, that really gets my juices flowing.
Keith, in 2000, I was interviewing for a job as a CFO, and I was talking to the owner of the business, who was just about to sell the business, and he said exactly that. He was probably 55 years old, maybe 60, and he said, "You know what? I can see what's happening with the explosion of the internet, and I don't want to have to deal with it." So he sold the business. He stayed in it for a few years. You know, he sold out, but stayed on as had a management contract with the buyer, so he could still stay engaged in the business, but he was getting out of ownership. And just like you said, sometimes there's changes going on in our environment and in our world, and we say, you know what, this is a good time for me to step out because there's so much change coming, and I don't want to have to deal with that when I'm, you know, late in my career. Let somebody younger, or let somebody who's got deeper pockets deal with that. What's coming? You know, AI might be another one right now that folks are thinking about.
Happen that revolutionized business in general. So, you know, I think about if the internet was as relevant when I was selling and getting out of the optical industry, I might not have sold. I might not have gotten out, because what it did, where I was opening up all these locations, I might have had just one great location that I was at all the time and running my online business from that location. And then I could have been global with selling stuff like a lot of these online eyeglass companies are.
Right.
Because there's no geographical boundaries. I mean,
Right.
You know, that's one of the beauties of selling online. But that's another topic that I definitely want to talk about in a future episode of building an online business versus an offline business, or both, having both.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so here's what I want to say as we end. Anyone that's watching this or any of our clips that we put out there, call us, email us. You know, you're thinking of starting a business, you're not sure, you know, what to do. Give us a call. I promise it won't cost you anything for the initial consultation, but we'll give you some good insights. And I think you'll get some good insights from today. And Greg, anything you want to add as we close for today?
I think you bring up a good point, Keith, is that if folks are thinking about getting into business ownership, I know sometimes the money's tight when you're starting a business, but it is a good time to have that trusted advisor alongside of you to help you work through some of those decisions. And I think, like you're saying, you know, you're already making a pretty significant investment. You don't want to not invest in something that might help you really make the right decision or help you save money as you're working through sort of that startup business ownership question. So yes, I would totally agree with what you're saying.
No question. And I would say, and I'm to be truly honest about my career, had I had a trusted advisor, and I'm going back 40 years ago, I probably, as I was expanding, I would have saved $100,000
Right.
with mistakes that I made,
Yeah.
just because I was just like, you know, I was like the cowboy, you know, just running around with both guns blazing. So
Well, you know, as a business owner, you've got a lot on your mind, right? And you've got a lot on your plate, and you're trying to juggle a lot of balls. And so for a ball to fall once in a while it's not unusual. But if you can have somebody help you with the juggling, and it'll help save you money in the long run, boy, it seems like a wise decision.
yeah, you're going to make mistakes. Just you want to make them small ones.
Right. And learn from them, right?
Yes.
As we've talked about before.
All right, Greg, as we sign off, until next week, and this is another great session.
It was, yeah. And I feel like we could talk about this for another hour.
We'll have other sessions on this as well. Actually, what will happen is as we have more guests, you know, I would like us to get somebody who's on the show that's thinking of starting a business.
Yeah, that would be really
valuable for our audience.
Yep.
All right, Captain, I'm signing off.
Hey, thanks, Keith.
Thanks.